We are finishing up the practical section of the book of Romans with chapter 14 through 15:12. In this section, Paul is going to talk about something very specific to the church at Rome. So if you haven't already gotten a chance, pause the video and read chapter 14 through 15 verse 12. Then come back to us. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to read chapters 14 and 15 of the book of Romans. And here Paul is describing a situation that is very unique to the church at Rome, but also a situation that we can apply to our lives. And so we want to look at what was true of them then, but also then how could we see this as something we can apply now. So as we think about it, what he's describing is that there's tension in the church. See, the church at Rome was made up of all different kinds of people from different ethnicities, different religious backgrounds, different social classes, different wealth. In this small church, see, when we go to church, we often pick a church of people that look and act similar to us, people who have similar beliefs and similar worship styles. I live in Virginia Beach, where there is a church on every corner, it seems like. At every major intersection, there's a church. And so I can pick and choose what kind of church people I want to hang out with. I can pick and choose what kind of worship experience I want, or what kind of pastor I want to listen to. And often we tend to group up with people who look and act like us. But they didn't have that luxury in the church of Rome. See, Rome was a very beginning church. Many historians believe that the church at Rome would have been somewhere between 50 and 100 people. And there was only one. Now, we'll see in chapter 16 that Paul greets 4 different households, so it's possible that they met in smaller groups throughout the city in different houses. But overall, there was one church, and it was really small. And so you were grouped into a group of people who were very, very different than you were. See, in that group, there are people from Jewish background, but there's also people from Greek and Roman background. In that group, there are people who are coming from very traditional, very conservative, rule-following families. And then there are other people who did whatever they want, and their families were very liberal and very open with the rules. In fact, many of them didn't have any. And all of those kinds of people are grouped into one group. Now have a common goal and common mission. But the same thing that happened then is going to happen anytime you get people who are different together. That's tension. So picture it at a potluck. Jewish background believers who were used to eating kosher food and definitely no pork are coming to a potluck with Gentiles who are serving up bacon-wrapped sausages. And the Jews are having a hard time saying, hey, we're not allowed to eat that. And the Gentiles are saying, I don't have to follow your rules. And so it created great tension. Now, Paul is going to mention 3 specific areas of tension: eating, drinking, and festivals. And so I want to explain what these would have looked like in their context. Eating is, as I just mentioned, a lot of it came from the difference between Gentiles and Jews. Those who were coming to the church from a Jewish background had very strict dietary laws. There were a lot of things they were not allowed to eat. But what's happening in particular in the church of Rome is an issue of eating meat. And it's not just pork, it's meat in general. Because at Rome, there were a lot of churches, a lot of temples. And these temples all day long were sacrificing animals. And so what do you do with all of that meat? Well, usually behind the temple was also a marketplace. And so people would buy cheap meat, discounted meat that had been sacrificed to idols at the temple. And so some of the Christians were coming saying, there is no way that we can eat meat that's been sacrificed to an idol. That meat has been blessed in a pagan way to worship a pagan idol, a pagan deity. And so many Christians were having a hard time eating any meat at all because it was really the only meat that was affordable was meat that had been sacrificed to idols. And so you had in one group people who said if you eat meat, then you are participating in idol worship. And then another group saying it's just meat. It doesn't have any bearing on my faith at all. It's just cheap meat. And so the very first issue was eating meat that had been sacrificed to idols, and it was causing a lot of tension in the church. The second one is one that's similar to our tension nowadays, and that's drinking alcohol. There were one group of people that were saying it is always wrong to drink alcohol, always, because the pagans, the Gentiles, the Greeks, and the Romans, they drink a lot of alcohol, and therefore do what drunk people do. And then there's another group of people saying a little alcohol isn't a big deal. As long as I don't do those things that the drunk people do, I can drink a little bit of alcohol with my meal. And there it was causing tension. The other one was festivals. See, the Romans loved to party, and they had parties all of the time for all kinds of reasons, but almost every festival and every party was something that was attached to a Roman god. And so in worship and celebration of the Roman god, they would then have a big festival and party. And so there were a group of Christians saying it is always wrong to participate in these parties. And so they would lock themselves up in their house until the party was over. But often these parties would go on for several days. And then there's another group of people saying, well, I'm not going to practice it in the same way. I'm not worshiping that God. I'm just going to enjoy the time with my family, with my friends. I'm going to enjoy the time off of work. I'm going to enjoy the festival. And so what it was producing was great tension in the church. And so it created this contrast between what Paul calls a weaker brother and a stronger brother. And so the weaker brother didn't eat any meat. He didn't drink alcohol, and he didn't celebrate festivals. But what he did do is judge other people that do. And you might find this to be true in anything that Christians disagree on. If you find yourself in the position of, I don't do that, then you might look at somebody who does and say, wow, did you see them? Did you see how much alcohol they drank? Did you see how much meat they brought? Did you see them celebrating that festival that we're not allowed to celebrate? And so they would consider themselves better Christians because they didn't practice all of these things. Then Paul describes the stronger brother. He does eat meat, he does drink alcohol, he does celebrate festivals, and he looks with contempt on those who do. Now, I find that these are weaker and stronger brother are things that we struggle with even today. Not in these same three contexts, but in various festivals and various things that we eat and various ways that we practice our Christianity. There's usually a group of people that says, no, we can't, and usually a group of people that says, yes, we can. And those who say, no, we can't, judge those who do as ungodly. Those who say, yes, we can, judge those who do it as prudes or as less than, because they show contempt for them because they don't practice these things. So I want to walk through some examples with you. Alcohol is still one today. There are Christians in the camp that say, no, you should never drink alcohol. And then others say, well, as long as I don't get drunk and I do it in moderation and I don't do the things that drunk people do, then drinking alcohol is okay. Another one I would put before you is the celebration of Halloween. There are certain groups of Christians and families that say it is always wrong to celebrate Halloween because Halloween has pagan roots, and so we will not do anything to celebrate Halloween. Then there's another group of Christians that say it's just fun to get dressed up and to get candy, and so they might say there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. As long as I'm not dressing my kids up in, demonic things, I'm going to celebrate Halloween. You might even find some Christians somewhere in the middle that might host like a Hallelujah harvest or a trunk or treat, where instead of going out into the community, they just do it at their church and still get dressed up, but do it in a more controlled setting. And so Halloween might be something that you might see. A good friend of mine from college experienced this tension because she was from New Orleans. And so every year around the beginning of Lent, we have Mardi Gras. And so Mardi Gras in New Orleans can get wild. People can get drunk and naked and do what drunk and naked people do. And so she found this great tension among the Christians in New Orleans because some of them said, no, we should not celebrate Mardi Gras in any way at all, ever. And so here the whole city would be having a big party, and they would not. But then you have another group of Christians that says, well, wait, there's a whole bunch of family parades. There's a whole bunch of parades and festivals that are not getting drunk and naked. And so there's nothing wrong with celebrating Mardi Gras as long as I'm not going down certain streets, or I'm not dressing in a certain way, or I'm not doing certain things. And so this tension is the same tension that we feel today. There are weaker brothers that would say, no, never, we cannot do it. And then we fill in the blanks. Maybe it's women wearing pants, or it's dancing, or it's drinking, or it's celebrating certain festivals. And then you have another group of people that says, wait, Paul said all things are permissible, just not all things are profitable. So because it's all permissible, then I can do it. And usually when these two groups of people come together, there is great tension. There are issues and struggles and anger. And so Paul is going to give here several 8 principles that we need to follow whenever we have tension of this kind. Now, I do want to say that we're talking about areas where the Bible does not specifically call something sin, gray areas where it can be open to interpretation. There are certain things that, for example, sexual immorality, God has clearly labeled as sinful and outside of the will of God. And so those are not areas that are permissible for Christians. We are specifically talking about areas where the Bible doesn't come down clearly and give us a thou shalt not. And so I want to go through the principles that Paul lays out in these 2 chapters. The first principle, we need to accept each other without quarreling. We need to choose not to fight against each other. Number 2, we need to be fully convinced in our own mind of what you believe to be right and wrong, and make up your mind ahead of time without being influenced against what you have believed. And so the time to decide, like let's say you're about to go off to college, and the time to decide whether or not you think drinking is okay is not the moment that you're at a party and somebody hands you a drink. Instead, this is something that you need to determine in your heart, and you need to be fully convinced in your mind. If you grew up in a family that says no alcohol ever, and it would feel wrong for you to drink alcohol, then it is wrong. And it's something you need to decide ahead of time. You need to be fully convinced in your own mind without being influenced. Number 3, whatever you do, do it to the Lord and give thanks. So if you celebrate Halloween, or if you celebrate Mardi Gras at a family festival, if you drink alcohol, if you go dancing, if you wear pants, and you fill in the blank with whatever causes tension in your church or in your family, if you do it unto the Lord and give thanks, then that thing becomes something that he can get glory from. Number 4, remember that you will give an account of your life to God. And so if you are using things that God has clearly called to sin as this, and saying, oh, this is a gray area, this doesn't really matter, I get to choose, you're going to give an account to God. If you do these things against your own conscience, you're going to give an account to God. Remember that God sees everything that you do, and he sees the intentions of your heart. Number 5, this one's so important. Do not put a stumbling block in the path of your brother. So if you are around somebody who has a significant issue with alcohol, that's not the time to use your liberal view of it. That's not the time to pull out your beer and your alcohol. If you are with somebody who clearly sees these things as wrong, then don't do it. Just because you are allowed doesn't mean you should. And so we need to love the people that we are around by choosing not to participate in certain things when we are around them, or not talk about it in a way that's derogatory. We need to not put a stumbling block in front of our brothers. Now, drinking alcohol, for somebody who says absolutely not ever, if I were to drink a beer in front of them, I'm not going to cause them to stumble into drinking alcohol, but I will cause them to stumble to judge me. And judging is wrong. And so I don't want to even tempt them to judge or gossip about me. And so I'm not going to participate in this activity so that I can keep their conscience clear, even of the judgment they would show me. Number 5, do nothing outside of faith or conscience. If your conscience tells you it is wrong, then it is wrong. So do not go against conscience. Paul is very clear in these verses that anything not done in faith is sin. So if you drink that alcohol, or you go to that festival, or you dance that dance, and the whole time you are feeling guilty, then that is a testament from the Spirit that you should not participate in that. Number 7, if you are strong, bear with the weak. Don't make fun of them. Don't show them contempt. Don't say, oh, they're such a prude because they don't do the things that I am allowed to do. Number 8, accept everyone because Christ has accepted you. He finishes this whole section with a prayer. He says, may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. See, as we love God, we're going to overflow. We're going to overflow to loving other people. As we receive the love that God has for us, as we receive the hope and joy that he has given us, we're going to overflow to hope and love and joy other people. And so if we are criticizing each other and we are condemning each other and judging each other for things that the Bible doesn't clearly say, then there's no way for God to fill us and for us to overflow into the lives of others. We will overflow the gospel of God as we live out our love for other people.